2025, something unimaginable is happening. 10 nations have united in closing their doors to Filipinos. It's shocking, unprecedented, and raises one pressing question: why? This isn't just about immigration policies or politics. What if this global rejection signals something far greater, something hidden beneath the surface? A spiritual battle that could reshape not only the destiny of Filipinos, but the global church itself. Could this be the fulfillment of ancient prophecies? The signs are undeniable, and what we're about to uncover might leave you speechless. For decades, Filipinos have been modern-day sojourners, spreading faith, hope, and resilience wherever they go. Their contributions as caregivers, missionaries, and community builders have brightened the darkest corners of the world. And yet, in 2025, their path is being obstructed like never before. Barriers are rising, borders are tightening, and the world seems to be turning its back on this extraordinary people. This video isn't just about uncovering the reasons behind these restrictions, it's about exploring their profound spiritual significance. Are these barriers merely political, or are they part of a divine narrative that we're all called to understand? The answers might not only explain these events but inspire you to see your own role in a global story that's still unfolding. To truly grasp what's happening, we must go beyond the headlines and dive into the prophetic and spiritual layers of this crisis. What we're about to reveal will challenge your perspective and might just change how you view these extraordinary times. Let's begin. The global trend: Filipinos facing rejection. In 2025, something extraordinary is happening. 10 nations have closed their doors to Filipinos. Visa denials, immigration bans, and rising social stigma have become the new reality. But why? Why is a group known for its resilience, faith, and unwavering contributions to society being rejected so systematically? Could this be a sign of something far deeper? For decades, Filipinos have been celebrated around the world. They've become synonymous with compassion, known for their hard work in hospitals, schools, and communities. From caregivers to teachers to spiritual leaders, Filipinos have brought light into some of the darkest corners of the globe. But now, nations that once welcomed them are turning their backs. Governments cite political and economic reasons, but is that the full story? The sudden rise in barriers seems too coordinated to ignore. Imagine a nurse who left her family behind to care for the sick in a foreign land. After years of service, she is told she's no longer welcome, not because of her actions, but because of where she's from. This isn't just a rejection of individuals, it's a rejection of the values and faith they represent. Why Filipinos? The unlikely target of global restriction. It's baffling. Filipinos are renowned for their dedication, family-allocated values, and deeply rooted faith. They work tirelessly, often filling roles others avoid, and yet they now find themselves blocked. Why would nations reject a group that has done so much good? Could it be that the answer lies not in politics, but in something more profound? Something spiritual? Consider this. The Bible repeatedly speaks of times when God's people would face persecution. Matthew 24:9 warns, "You will be hated by all nations for my name's sake." Could the challenges Filipinos face today be a modern echo of these ancient words? The plight of Filipinos mirrors an ancient story. The Israelites in Egypt. Like Filipinos, the Israelites were a people of faith living in foreign lands. Exodus 1:9-10 tells us, "The people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them." The Egyptians, driven by fear and jealousy, oppressed the Israelites, despite their contributions to society. Could the same fear be driving today's rejection of Filipinos? Perhaps it's not the individuals being targeted, but the faith and values they carry. In the spiritual realm, resistance often rises against those who bring light. The rejection of Filipinos abroad may not just be about closed borders. It might be a sign of a deeper battle, one where the forces of division and fear clash with unity and faith. But here's the question: are these restrictions just political, or are they part of a larger, more profound spiritual narrative? What if the rejection of Filipinos is a sign of their divine purpose, and the world's resistance to it a prophetic warning? The spiritual context of Filipino rejection. Imagine this: 10 nations, unified in one action, closing their doors to Filipinos in 2025. On the surface, it seems like a political decision, but what if it's something much deeper? What if this rejection isn't just a headline, it's a prophecy being fulfilled before our very eyes? What if Filipinos, often called modern-day sojourners, are at the center of a divine mission and the world is pushing back? The prophetic warning. The Bible has spoken of times like this. In Matthew 24:9, Jesus said, "Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake." This isn't just a warning, it's a blueprint for what happens when God's people rise to fulfill their mission. Throughout history, spiritual resistance has always followed those carrying a divine assignment. From the early Christians facing Roman persecution to the Israelites oppressed under Pharaoh, rejection has often been the precursor to God's greatest movements. And now Filipinos, a resilient, faith-driven people, are experiencing this rejection. They've traveled across the globe as caregivers, teachers, and missionaries, bringing not just labor but light into the world. But why are they being turned away now? Why are nations tightening borders and building barriers specifically against this group? Could it be that this isn't just a geopolitical move, but a spiritual resistance against a people positioned for a global mission? The role of spiritual resistance. The Bible reveals that spiritual battles often manifest in the physical world. In Ephesians 6:12, Paul reminds us, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness." When doors close and barriers rise, it's not always about policies or economics. Sometimes it's about the spiritual light people carry and the darkness pushing back. Filipinos, known for their faith and resilience, are uniquely equipped to bring unity and hope to a divided world. But the enemy thrives on division, and as these faithful individuals spread God's love, resistance intensifies. The effort from visa rejections to outright bans, the signs are clear. This isn't just about blocking people, it's about blocking a mission. The rejection of Filipinos echoes the story of early Christians who, despite persecution, spread the gospel far and wide. But here's the twist. What the enemy means for harm, God often uses for good. Could these barriers actually be paving the way for something greater? The Filipino mission. Filipinos have a unique role in the global church. Their warmth, compassion, and unshakable faith make them natural bridge builders in divided communities. As modern-day sojourners, they've brought the message of God's love into workplaces, schools, and even nations hostile to Christianity. Just like Joseph in Egypt or Daniel in Babylon, Filipinos are being repositioned for a purpose greater than we can yet see. Every rejection, every closed door could be part of a divine strategy. History has shown that God's people often face trials before breakthroughs. Could the rejection of Filipinos today be the beginning of a new global mission? This rejection isn't the end of their story. It's the start of something extraordinary. If this is a spiritual battle, then the rejection of Filipinos carries profound implications, not just for them, but for the entire church. These barriers challenge us to discern the times. Just as Jesus warned in Matthew 16:3, "You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times." This is our wake-up call. The church must rally in prayer, unity, and support, recognizing that Filipinos are not just economic migrants, they are carriers of faith and vessels of God's mission. So what does this mean for you? Are you ready to see these events not as barriers, but as opportunities to stand with God's people and advance His kingdom? If the rejection of Filipinos is part of a spiritual battle, then it's also a call to action for the global church to awaken, unite, and respond. What we do next could shape not only their future, but the future of faith around the world. Lessons from history. Patterns of divine repositioning. Let's go back to the story of the Israelites in Egypt. They were foreigners in a land that once embraced them, their numbers growing, their presence undeniable. But over time, the Egyptians began to view them with suspicion and fear. In Exodus 1:9-10, Pharaoh declares, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, in attempts to suppress their growth. But what Pharaoh didn't realize was this: every act of oppression was part of a divine setup. God was preparing the Israelites not for defeat, but for deliverance. Now fast forward to today. Filipinos, much like the Israelites, are scattered across the globe. They carry with them a faith so vibrant and a sense of community so strong that it transforms the spaces they inhabit: hospitals, schools, workplaces, and churches. Their spiritual influence is undeniable, but as their light shines brighter, barriers begin to rise. Immigration policies tighten. Rejection becomes more common. The question is, why? Could it be that, like the Israelites, their rejection isn't a sign of failure but a precursor to something greater? Could the increasing restrictions be God's way of repositioning Filipinos for a mission only He can see? Examples of divine repositioning, lessons from biblical heroes. This pattern isn't new. Throughout history, God has used rejection and displacement as tools for greater purpose. Think about Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers. What seemed like betrayal was actually divine redirection, positioning him to save nations during a famine. In Genesis 50:20, Joseph tells his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Or consider Daniel taken captive in Babylon. Far from being silenced, Daniel's unwavering faith and wisdom elevated him to a position of influence, impacting an entire empire. What if the rejection faced by Filipinos today is not an end, but the beginning of a greater divine assignment? Could these closed doors actually be gateways to a higher calling? History shows us that when God's people are displaced, His plans are often accelerated. The early church thrived under persecution, scattering believers who carried the gospel to places it had never been before. Could this scattering of Filipinos today be a modern-day parallel, a divine strategy to spread light into the darkest corners of the world? What does this mean for us? This isn't just about Filipinos, it's about all of us. If God is repositioning His people for a larger mission, what role does the global church play? How should we respond when we see these patterns unfolding before our eyes? As we explore the spiritual implications of this modern-day repositioning, we must ask ourselves, are we prepared to step into the opportunities God is creating, even if they come disguised as challenges? What if the rising barriers against Filipinos aren't just political maneuvers, but signs of a greater spiritual battle? What if this resistance isn't meant to stop them, but to scatter them for something extraordinary? The church cannot afford to ignore this moment. The church's role in spiritual shifts. Throughout history, moments of division and persecution have been pivotal in God's plan. The early Christians faced tribulation, rejection, and even death for their faith. Yet these trials became the catalyst for the greatest expansion of the church. It wasn't the absence of obstacles that allowed the gospel to spread. It was the obstacles themselves. Jesus foretold this in Matthew 24:9. "Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake." These words were not just warnings, they were a call to readiness. Today, the restrictions placed on Filipinos echo this ancient narrative. Could these roadblocks be preparing the global church for its next great mission? What if this isn't a crisis but an opportunity for revival? So will the church rise to the occasion, or will it let these barriers go unanswered? Hope in persecution, turning obstacles into opportunities. History teaches us that persecution refines faith and strengthens mission. The early church thrived not despite its challenges, but because of them. Acts 8:04 reminds us, those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. Now, imagine this. Philippus, blocked from one nation, find open doors in another, carrying the seeds of faith into places that had been untouched. Could the scattering of today mirror the scattering of the early believers, divinely orchestrated to ignite revival? Could this be a new season of global revival? What if every rejection is actually a redirection in God's grand design? Encouragement to Filipinos. A mission evolving. To our Filipino brothers and sisters, your mission isn't over, it's evolving. Your resilience, compassion, and unwavering faith are tools God is using to shape the spiritual landscape of the world. Just as Joseph's rejection led him to a position of influence in Egypt, your challenges today could be preparing you for a greater purpose. Philippians 1:6 offers this promise: "He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus." Trust that your path, though uncertain, is divinely guided. A message for all believers. But this isn't just about Filipinos. It's about every believer. What role will you play in this unfolding story? Now is the time for the global church to act. Recognize these events as spiritual shifts, not mere political changes. Pray fervently for those facing barriers. Intercede for Filipinos and others experiencing rejection. Stand united against the spirit of division. Jesus warned in Mark 3:25, "If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand." Division weakens us, but unity can unleash God's power in unprecedented ways. Could this be the moment God is preparing His people for something greater, something we can't yet see? So how do we respond to these barriers, not just as Filipinos, but as a global community of faith? Will we see these obstacles as walls or as gateways to God's divine opportunity? What if everything you've just heard isn't a coincidence, but a divine call? The barriers, the rejections, the scattering of Filipinos. What if these are not walls, but gateways? What if this is God's way of positioning His people for a global revival like never before? The question isn't just about what's happening, it's about how we as believers will respond. Will we stand still or will we rise in faith? Will we allow division to weaken us or will we unite as a global church to overcome the darkness? This moment is bigger than borders. It's about being part of a divine mission that calls us all to action. Now, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this? Do you believe these events are part of a larger spiritual narrative? How do you think we, as a global community of faith, should respond? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in this conversation. Let's spark a dialogue that could inspire. If this message stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your family, and your church community. Let's spread the word and bring this conversation to those who need to hear it. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this journey. Your time, your attention, and your faith mean more than you know. Together we are stronger, and together we can make a difference. If you found this video meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We're just scratching the surface of what God is doing in these prophetic times, and there's so much more to uncover. Join us on this journey of faith, discovery, and action. Remember, every obstacle is an opportunity in disguise. Every rejection carries the potential for a divine redirection. God is moving, and His plans are never thwarted. The question is, are you ready to step into your part of His story?